have a nasty parade of low-pressure systems preparing to move towards the west coastline, providing California, and it looks like Oregon this time as well, a chance of seeing another resurgence of our Pineapple Express/atmospheric river event, producing some isolated amounts of severe weather, as well as large quantities of rainfall that could lead to flash flooding, and of course, the trademark high amounts of mountain snow. Welcome back to the Weather Center, everybody. If you like this video, please like and share it with folks you believe will benefit from this information, and consider subscribing if you're brand new to the channel or have been contemplating it here and there as we continue to roll out these updates. Please be sure you also have your notification bell turned on so you don't miss a recurring video as we move along through the rest of the winter time of 2024. But with those logistics being out of the way, guys, let's get started. So we're looking at the west coast of the United States out over the Pacific, and as you can see, we have a tremendous amount of activity going on over the north and eastern parts of the Pacific Ocean, with one low pressure system here, one weak shortwave baroclinic system moving across the northern tier United States, another in close proximity in hot pursuit of it back behind it with a very strong, robust cold jet stream moving right through the triple point of this baroclinic comma cloud system that we have pressing towards the west coastline. It's this chain of frontal systems that are going to once again produce that flash flood scenario. Very high, excessive amounts of rainfall down in the low levels, particularly along the northern California coast, the windward side of the Cascades in Oregon, and then pushing towards the Sierra Nevadas until we can make that transition to the heavy snow as you get higher and higher into the terrain. Now, so far, our forecast models are not thinking we're going to have as strong of low pressure systems moving towards the west coast, but the duration of them hanging out in that general quadrant of the United States and Western Canada as well, we can't forget about you guys up there, is what's likely to help induce a lot of that severe heavy rainfall that could produce the flash floodings, the localized areas of very heavy inundation and collecting of very high amounts of water, as well as the landslide and the mudslide threat and the rock slides because of the differences in terrain out there from the valley areas to the mountainous terrain, the rougher terrain as you quickly get further into interior parts of California. And as these systems move ashore in that difluent quadrant, that leading edge where the cold and warm sectors are established, whether it be a barotropic mature wave or a baroclinic unstable wave with no occluded front attached to it, that's going to probably be where we see those isolated bouts of stronger thunderstorms as our CAPE values try to go up with that very consistent and rather aggressive onshore flow. Moving right along, taking a look at the Euro, you can see the European model is doing a fantastic job highlighting each of these individual perturbations in the pattern that we have, a 996 millibar low, already helping to bring in some onshore flow and some showery rainfall activity to the northwest quadrant of California and the extreme southwestern tip of the state of Oregon. As I highlighted on the infrared satellite shot, you can see a lot of that higher terrain snowfall occurring for parts of Idaho on the eastern side of the state, a large majority of Montana, and the higher terrain features of Wyoming, where we're particularly seeing a lot of higher terrain mountain snowfall right now. We don't have too much in the way of it mixing down into the low levels of the more urbanized settings in the lower terrain areas of most of those aforementioned states. But of course, as these baroclinic systems, these unstable and mature waves continue to propagate up towards the western seaboard, we are likely to see a little bit of that influence trickle down into the lower levels of the environment where we can realize them a bit to a greater extent. You continue through the loop, there goes one pushing ashore, transitioning quickly from heavy rain along the coastline to heavy snow as you transition or propagate across the mountains. And then here comes that second one deepening very rapidly into a 982 deep occluded low. You can see two separate vortices embedded within its center of circulation. This here would more than likely be that occluded front appendage where the cold air catches up to our warm sector, and the warm front is somewhere surging into British Columbia, Alberta at this point, probably fairly weak down in the low levels because of the terrain and it trying to overrun the mountains of the Rockies, the North and Central Rocky Mountains specifically. And then we have another almost instantly occluding low back within the cold sector of this outlining jet that's going to rapidly propagate off to the east-northeast, moving towards the Northern California area. And these slews of frontal rainfalls are what's going to help to produce that elevated flood risk and that severe weather threat, particularly along the leading edge, I do believe. We saw a lot of funnel and tornado activity as well as strong winds with the last atmospheric river setup, so it's more than likely we will see a recurrence of that, especially if this established itself in a very similar manner. Here's taking a look at WPC's excessive rainfall forecast, and you can see as we go through Saturday and Sunday this week, and we not only have that slight risk on the immediate coastline of California, but if you take a look down in Florida as well, we have that marginal risk for some excessive rainfall with that system that's expected to form up in the western Gulf of Mexico as it comes across Mexico and southern Texas, finally developing into a low-pressure center as it moves off to the east-northeast and almost due east to an extent as it butts up against some cold air that's going to also be coming down through the Great Plains Plains, the Ohio, Mississippi valleys, kind of meeting up with it and almost sandwiching it and stretching it out like an accordion-like appendage across much of the Gulf, the extreme Gulf coastline. We won't really see too much impact in terms of interior parts of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. We will get some coastal shower activity and maybe an isolated thunderstorm at best, but a lot of it, guys, is mainly just going to be a high rain, a heavy rain event for a lot of us, especially here in the Sunshine State. Here's our quantitative precipitation forecast brought to us once again by WPC, and as you take this through time, this is days 1 through 3. You can already see that excessive rainfall piling up on the windward side of the Cascades in Oregon. Some parts of Washington State look to get a little bit of that precipitation action as well, with a lot of good rainfall occurring in the northern half entirely of California. Nix maybe a little bit of that valley area in the center parts of the state, central California. It looks to predominantly confined to the northwest quadrant, especially along the coastline, and then right into the Sierra Nevadas before we move to the leeward side and we start to see a lot more of that downsloping and that wintry style weather. If I go to days 1 through 5, you can see that precip forecast really begins to skyrocket. We're now above 5 to 7 inches across much of northern California, especially over the higher terrain features, with Oregon also starting to reach that similar threshold. And down across the Gulf of Mexico and the northern half of the Florida Peninsula, we're also trying to breach that 3-inch threshold, getting closer and closer as that next storm system tries to propagate through. Now, all in all, folks, even though we do have some major problems looming on the horizon for California, and it looks like the western half of Oregon, overall, our weather pattern across the rest of the lower 48 is going to be calming down. I don't really see any indications for some very severe winter storms, whether it be in way of those southeast quadrant severe thunderstorms or even heavy snow winter storm conditions, at least for the next 7 to 10 days. There is a little bit of discontinuity through our models, as always, especially as we slowly but surely approach the transition point between winter and spring, which I do think is going to arrive early. We have a big warming trend on the horizon that's going to give a lot of us across the southern half of the United States a brief glimpse, if not an extended glimpse, if not an early entry to the springtime season, just based on what I'm seeing in the 15-20 day time frame as we move along and look at our ensembles and the big picture weather pattern at that macro scale view. So as I quickly take you through time, we're looking at the overall United States pattern with the Euro, and you can see we have that Pineapple Express set up over the extreme northwest quadrant of the United States. This entire area, if you're within this grid box, is going to feel the effects of each of these atmospheric river setup systems moving across the Pac Northwest on northern periphery of California, the Sierra Nevadas, and moving up through the Great Basin, Intermountain west of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada. You guys are going to feel some sort of an influence, whether it be heavy snow, heavy rain, high winds, some isolated bouts of thunderstorm activity on the immediate coastlines of California, and maybe even a little further inland. Highly doubt we'll get the instability to breach that far into interior western United States, but we will see. And then we're going to have these very, very fast-moving Clipper-style systems moving through the Midwest, the upper tier U.S., the northern plains, parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then as they propagate across the Great Lakes, you're going to get that lake effect as we saw yesterday. Even after that winter storm had propagated through, we had a lot of good lake effect snow still occurring in parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York State, helping to try to nudge those snow totals up from what we saw over the last 48 hours. This is a quick glance at how much overall precip we're thinking for the West before we transition out of this portion of the video. I'm very rapidly taking you through the NOAA blend of models, and as you can see at the 192-hour mark, obviously this is well into the future. We're looking at 22 February at this point. Much of western Oregon is going to be approaching 2 to 3 inches of rainfall, and then especially northern California with some very small-scale, localized pockets of trying to get upwards of a foot of rainfall, but the general average we're looking for is going to be between that 4 to 6 inch threshold, which is very similar to what we saw with the last situation that unfolded there in terms of a Pineapple Express. We're going to continue to see some wiggling and wobbling as we always do, but overall, folks, I would definitely prepare for that flood chance to increase. Now, here we go. Let's get into the snow for all of my snow enthusiasts out there. I don't think the hype for the snowstorms is going to stop just yet, unfortunately, even though it does seem like winter is trying to chill out, no pun intended there. As you can see with these Clipper-style systems, they're going to be fast-moving. They're going to propagate across the northern half of the United States, dropping a little bit of snow. We're looking at maybe 3 to 4 inches maximum, guys, and they're going to be moving pretty fast. So at this point, we're really looking at some light dustings, couple inches here and there, some sprinkling of that snowfall, and then they're going to quickly exit the United States AOR, moving primarily along that United States-Canadian border as we transition to more of a zonal pattern, which we'll wrap up the video with today. We have 2 areas that we want to watch for some increased snowfall. That first Clipper-style system that's going to move partially through the Dakotas, parts of Nebraska, through the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the very trademark area where our jet stream has kind of been more or less oriented a large majority of this winter time. keeping the winter more or less confined to the northeast quadrant of the U.S. And if you look right in through here, this very thin band of some light snow activity, there's another very weak system that's also going to bring down some cold air across much of the central and eastern half of the lower 48. That's also responsible for sandwiching our storm system across the Gulf of Mexico and dragging it very elongated looking across the Florida Peninsula. That's also going to bring in some snow, but we're really not seeing much in the way of very, very high totals. So for a lot of you guys out there hoping for snow, you're going to get a nice little peppering of it, if you will. Once again, we're going to quickly glance at our NOAA blend of models so we can get a better idea of what's expected to shake out. As we approach the 120-hour mark, as we get into the beginning parts of next week, you can see a lot of that heavy mountain snow induced by the multitude of low-pressure storm systems that are likely to breach the western coastline of California and Oregon, really helping to pile up the snow over the Rocky Mountains. And then here's our first system expected to transition very rapidly across the northern half of the U.S., and then as you can see, the NOAA blend is thinking maybe at best an inch or two, and even that might be gratuitous according to the NOAA blend, as well as the SHREF thinking very much more or less the same thing. We'll see some very light dustings of snow, but in comparison to what January looked like in the first half of February, our snow is slowly but surely starting to dissipate. We'll come back to the mean sea level pressure product on the Euro, and we'll focus particularly on that first and second clipper system. You can see the first one rapidly ejecting across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Northeast, and then that second frontal feature trying to develop and get itself going along the leading edge of this polar high pressure that's currently situated over Montana, Wyoming, spreading into the northern and central plains of the U.S. This is our first unstable wave with a little bit of that light powdery snow, if you will, trying to move along its northern apex, kind of getting a lot of that moisture entrained within the center of circulation, running back into that polar high pressure to help it transition to that light snowfall. And here is that next storm system that could bring some heavy rainfall for the Florida Peninsula, interrupting our Daytona 500 plans this upcoming weekend. I really do believe we're going to have a Monday race out there for my race fans, my NASCAR fans out there. You continue to the 96-hour point, and you can see as fast as they popped up on the map, we have lost all of our indications of very heavy snowfall over much of the United States. Outside of some lingering lake effect, that's going to persist. That'll definitely be more of our stubborn snowfall that'll remain in place for an extended window of time, helping to produce more higher amounts for parts of New York, Pennsylvania, and the Michigan Peninsula, and mainly the northeastern tip of Minnesota, transitioning across the Canadian-U.S. border. And then as you can see, as our storm system deepens down off the United States coast, the northeast coastline, I should say, here on the eastern side of the chart, we have this very, very, very long and stretched out looking frontal appendage that starts in Central America, parts of Mexico, moves up through the central Gulf of Mexico just to the south of our Gulf Coast states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and then just really produces a very good period of time of rainfall, a mixed precip event in terms of stratiform showery rain, some pockets of heavier rainfall, and maybe some sporadic isolated thunderstorm activity. I'm not really looking at the chance of severe with this, at least as of right now, and the trends from this last Saturday that just passed look more or less kind of like an elongated stretch of rainfall that's going to persist for a lot of us down here in the southeast as the system slowly but surely gets pulled out into the Atlantic by its parent low system just to the south of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. Here's a look at what the NOAA blend is thinking for the Florida Peninsula. So as I'd mentioned previously, guys, you can see the Gulf Coast line, the immediate coastline, is going to get some light rain from this system as it tries to move across to the east-northeast. And then the NOAA blend is not going too excessive with our rain totals. We could see some embedded pockets of upwards of 2 inches, but it looks like on average, once again for the state of Florida, as we've seen on a repetitive basis now for several months at this point, guys, we're looking at 1 to 2 inches maximum as this system transitions through, and it should hopefully be clearing by very early Monday morning at the very latest. Some of our models think it'll be Sunday night it'll finally kick on out of here. The Euro and the Canadian model are kind of keeping it in the picture until maybe early Monday morning. As the sun comes up and we get close to that lunch hour, the rain will finally completely conclude, and we can get that Daytona 500 race hopefully going mid-afternoon on Monday. So we'll see. And then last but not least, we're going to take a look at our long-range GFS and just very quickly scroll through time. You can see we do have a sharp amplitude ridge that embeds itself over western Canada, the northwest quadrant of the U.S., but overall, it really doesn't look like on the horizon we have much in the way of significant cold plunges. We do get a bit of a bowling ball effect over Ontario and Quebec that tries to scrape through the Midwest and the Great Lakes before very rapidly retreating along the upper edge, the leading edge of a ridge that's oriented north to south across the central and northern parts of the Atlantic. And I do believe that's probably because of our NAO going back into a bit more of a negative anomaly. We're not going to have as highly amplified of semi-permanent pressure systems between Greenland and parts of Europe, allowing this to take on a bit more of a zonal pattern, more west to east, as you can see here. We still have some amplified long wave features here. We have a trough along the west coast, providing us with that atmospheric river setup, a bit of a toppling ridge trying to hold itself together over the Rocky Mountains, a weak trough bringing down some of that cold air in time for the next weekend and the following weekend for that matter. But all in all, looks like most of our jet is going to try to remain fairly low-end meridional, if not almost more zonal, particularly over CONUS. So I don't know, folks. I'm really starting to dig into what exactly Phil was thinking when he didn't see a shadow, and in terms of forecasting an early spring arrival, it does seem like that could shake out. At least for the rest of February, we're not looking at any significant snow events. We're not looking at any major bomb cyclones or winter storms or nor'easter patterns. We're going to have to see exactly what the transition between February into March looks like, but on the immediate horizon where we can see as of today, I'm telling you guys right now, if you see anything in terms of major winter storms or any kind of defeating headlines, unless you live out west, the weather's going to be fairly quiet. We'll have some things going on here and there, but no cause for alarm or anything substantial that you guys need to be worried about, stressing over, or preparing for. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we're going to wrap up this latest Weather Center update. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to join me on February 14th, 2024. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there who will be celebrating, whether it be Singles Awareness Day, significant others, spouses alike, all the families and friends out there who will be celebrating the Valentine's Day holiday to the best of their ability. I do hope you have a great one and wish you all the best of luck and have a great time, not only today, but over this weekend if you decide to spread your plans into the weekend. If you like this video, drop me a like, drop me a share, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn your notifications on, guys. I really hope and aspire to continue to grow this weather community together with each and every one of you as we approach the transitional point between winter into the spring severe weather season, and then, of course, the fateful arrival of the 2024 hurricane season, where you can guarantee the Weather Center here is going to be working feverishly night and day, 24/7 around the clock, whether I'm on camera or not, to keep you guys safe and ahead of the weather that Mother Nature could be throwing at us, especially as it does look to be a rather treacherous and ambiguous summer as a lot of things get set in motion. So thank you very much once again, guys. We'll see you again soon, but until then, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.